Then Túrin sprang about, and strode against him, and the edges of Gurthang shone as with flame. Andúril came down upon his helm. There was a flash like flame, and the helm burst asunder. Hey everyone, Yoyston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we are looking at two of the greatest warriors among men from two different ages. We've got Túrin from the first, and Aragorn from the third. While they are both warriors, heroes of the free peoples, let's look at the hypothetical of what if they did go against each other outside of time. My friends, thank you all for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. Meeting in the wilds of Middle-earth, Aragorn, King Elisar of Gondor and Arnor, would spot a man in black, with a ceremonial helm upon his head, a dragon helm of dwarven make. The same dwarf, in fact, that made Narsil before it was Andúril. From the great stories and lore of old, Aragorn would know him, a distant relation, the cousin of his great ancestor Túr. As for Túrin Turambar, the doomed man would see this king in silver and gold, 7 stars, a crown, and a white tree upon the breastplate of his chest. Túrin would pay him little heed, wishing not to get caught up in the affairs of other men. But if this exchange turned poor, and the two legendary magical blades were drawn, Andúril for Aragorn, Gurthang for Túrin, how would it all go? Now, let's look at each character's backgrounds. We're going to take them at their strongest point in their stories. Aragorn right after the War of the Ring, and Túrin Turambar before the slaying of Glaurung, made smarter and more tactical by his time defending the woodsmen of Brethil. Granted, he's a little older in that part of the story, but I think he is the best warrior when he brings down the dragon. So, looking at the backgrounds here, let's start with Aragorn. He is a man of the Third Age, and according to the lore, he is the hardiest of living men at the end of the Third Age, made so by his trials in the wilds, what he did for Rohan and Gondor in his youth as Thorongil, fighting against Umbar and going off into Harad and Rhûn, even adventuring through Moria at a certain time. But again, he is at his strongest during or right after the War of the Ring. Crowned King of Gondor and Arnor, having Andúril being still young in the terms of Númenórean kings, but old enough to have seen quite a lot of war, especially when compared to other mortals. So, one thing we have to remember with Aragorn, he is trained by elves, mentored by Gandalf, good at tracking, right? He tracked down Gollum. He's a warrior who's seen so many years of combat and war in the south and east. He overcomes temptation, the temptation to where he could have taken the ring from Frodo, and he's also a strategist, being the commander who came up with the idea to divert Sauron's attention at the Black Gate, giving Frodo his chance at victory. He is quite a formidable foe, absolutely, a mythical warrior of legend. Now let's turn our gaze to Túrin. He is certainly one of, if not the strongest of men at his time, perhaps Beren, Túr, and his own father Húrin aside, but even with them, he is incredibly powerful, a great force to be reckoned with. His father, Húrin, is noted by Tolkien to be the strongest warrior among men. Now, whether that applies to all men across all ages is up for debate, I would say, but it could be that Húrin was an even better warrior than Aragorn and anyone else. So Túrin is his son. Túrin is trained by elves of Doriath in his youth, and probably picks up a few things fighting alongside Beleg, Strongbow, his outlaws, as well as the elves of Nargothrond, and perhaps even the men of Brethil as well. Now, he is used to fighting orcs of Angband, and slaying many of them, creating this infamous name for himself. He slays Easterlings also, and of course goes on to kill Glaurung. Now, with the exception of Glaurung freezing him and kind of putting him under his gaze, right, giving Túrin this sort of curse, and the orcs that ambushed him and captured him even before this, Túrin rarely, if ever, actually loses a battle, oftentimes resulting in the slaying of people who didn't deserve it. So that's kind of part of his doom, part of his fate, as I've always read it. Túrin is such a great warrior among men that he even slays a lot of people incidentally, such as Beleg, and many others that didn't deserve to die. So he's a lot more complicated when it comes to this. And there is something to be said about the enemies he's used to fighting versus the enemies Aragorn's used to fighting. We can approach this by a certain lens looking at Tolkien's works, that many of the items, people, villains and heroes that come from the Elder Days, so the years of the trees, the years of the lamps in the First Age, all of those times, everything then was more intense, right? The weapons were stronger, the heroes were stronger, the villains were stronger. All of that was much more powerful in the Elder Days than it was in later days. With Túrin slaying many of the orcs of that time, it is worth noting that perhaps his enemies were larger and more fearsome than the enemies Aragorn took on later on. Also, we'll come back to this here in a bit, but it is worth mentioning too that at the end of Túrin's story, of course even after he dies, during the Dagor Daggerath, if we take that into account, Túrin is the one to slay Melkor or Morgoth in the lore. Right? He is the one to stick a renewed Gurthang, his sword, through Morgoth's heart and kill the Dark Lord, the first Dark Lord, in the end. Tolkien, again, kind of scrapped the idea, or at least changed his mind about much of the Dagor Daggerath, so however you want to regard that as canon is certainly up to you, but it's worth mentioning. Putting aside the story and the lore of the characters, let's look at the weapons and armor that they have, the trinkets they carry. As for Aragorn, obviously he's got Enduril. It's powerful, remade from the dwarven sword Narsil. Again, the same dwarf that forged Túrin's helm, the dragon helm of Dor-lómin, Telkar. Now, Narsil was and could be broken, but the sheath that Aragorn receives from Galadriel at Lothlorien makes any sword drawn from it, so Enduril, unbreakable, and always cleaned and so forth. As for his armor, he's got armor from Gondor, being King Elisar, and it's some of the best of what any of the men of the West would have to offer. As for Túrin, he has, of course, Gurthang, and that is perhaps the most powerful sword in Middle-earth, as it is made of meteorite. It's even different from other First Age swords in that it's one of two forged by Ewell the Dark Elf, and it has some measure of its own sentience, at least according to the mythology of Túrin, as the sword speaks to him and him to it, and it takes Túrin's life and breaks. Túrin also has the dragon helm of Dor-lómin. Now this is an incredibly heavy and difficult to wear helmet made for dwarves, but Túrin actually had the strength among few others to actually wear the helm as a man, and it probably withstood dragonfire, as did other dwarven masks, but incredible protection, incredible renown to come along with this helm. That's really the weapons, armor, and other trinkets worth noting, right? The Ring of Bark here doesn't carry any special powers about it and so forth, but those are going to be the ones that really come into play. As for magic, there is very little to none at play here. Aragorn has a bit more, I guess, magic, if you want to call it that, than Túrin does, such as his healing abilities, but it would probably not have helped him much, if at all, in this fight. Now, as for their other skills and capabilities, shout out to my second channel, Masters of Mythology. I did a comparison, a who would win between Odin and Zeus, and for them, I kind of broke down more of the skills, right? Who has the tactics and who has the strength and all of that. But honestly, for this pair-up, it might not be worth doing that because they're quite close overall in terms of their strength, their battle prowess, their strategy, and so forth. But I will give an edge more to Aragorn's other abilities. I think he's a bit more versatile in many ways because he has wisdom in battle gained through over 80 years of life. But Túrin still has some youth and incredible strength. For all of Aragorn's allies and gifts that are given to him, Túrin still has powerful implements of his own and a curse attached to him. So, let's take a look at a one-on-one. Again, we're taking them at their most powerful points in their lore. Aragorn versus Túrin. While it is very likely that, while Aragorn is probably a more skilled combatant and warrior, having more experience over the years, having knowledge and insight into many of his foes, taking part in so many wars and so many battles, I do think that because of the doom that drives Túrin, his ability in combat, his overall strength, that being more or less all he knew, and his sword, I think Túrin beats Aragorn. It's also, again, worth coming back to the fact that Túrin, even with the help, obviously, of Tulkas and Eärendil, he does kill Morgoth, the Dark Lord. Aragorn could not even take down Sauron. So if we do consider that, on a one-on-one basis, Túrin probably takes down Aragorn, being a warrior of the Elder Days, being used to probably fighting more fearsome types of orcs of Angband versus orcs of Mordor. I think Túrin takes this in an all-out duel. Now, let's look at an all-out war, where they are able to call upon their allies, strengthen numbers, and so forth. As for Aragorn, he would be able to call upon the following: the Elves of Rivendell, a lot of them from Lothlorien and perhaps Mirkwood as well, dwarves from under the mountain. He'd be able to call upon pretty much all of the armies of Gondor, one of his realms, as well as many, if not all of the armies of Rohan. He'd be able to call upon his rangers from Arnor, the Oathbreakers, if we kind of go out of the timeline a little bit at least. He'd be able to call upon the Oathbreakers, assuming he hadn't dismissed them yet. The Fellowship of the Ring, consisting of those mostly great warriors, as well as perhaps hobbits of the Shire, because as we know from the past, hobbits also came to the aid of the kings of Arnor in the past, such as during the Battle of Fornost. So he has all of these to call upon. As for Túrin, he does have some allies to call upon, but certainly not as many. He's got the Elves of Doriath, at least those that would follow him. Again, he was kind of a controversial figure after some of his deeds there, so probably not even all of the elves, but many of them, such as even King Thingol. Outlaws, his outlaws that followed him for a time in his story. Beleg Strongbow, worthy ally. Maybe one or two of the petty dwarves. Right, I wouldn't really count on them much based on what happens in his story. Men of Brethil, some of the people of the forest that he lived with, and anyone remaining in his homeland of Dor-lómin. We must not forget that he came from a house of lords, the House of Hador. And so that gives him some authority to call upon whichever men would follow him. We might even say Hurin. We can even throw him in, his father, and maybe even the rest of his family. But it's pretty much that small faction from the Silmarillion versus almost all of the free peoples from the end of the Third Age. Hurin might be incredibly strong, Túrin also, but with these numbers, it's really not even close. And this is much more clearly defined with an Aragorn victory. He just simply has more allies based on all of the deeds and the renown he has. And many of them are better warriors than who Túrin could call upon. Skill is one thing, but as we see with power and strength in Middle-earth, knowing that you have a world of allies to call upon, that is a whole different kind of power. So, there we have it. I think Túrin takes the win in a duel, one-on-one versus Aragorn, but I think Aragorn easily takes the victory in an all-out war against Túrin and his forces. So, my friends, thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on this battle in the comments below. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider getting some candles for our friends Mythologie Candles, or order some Wet Area United Cutlery Lord of the Rings weapon replicas and other great items, and use the code WEST at checkout. Please check out our merch as well. Join our memberships and Patreon for access to our Discord server to be able to talk to me directly, as well as our monthly podcast. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons and YouTube members, Todes Morgen, Joby Weasel, Ed Patterson, ComicNut64, Zoomi, and Peter Sheppard. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.